Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Joe and welcome to a brand new video. This is going to be something a little bit different, right? And it's something I've always kind of been asked about and I've never made a video on it for multiple reasons. The first reason is I generally tend to change up my thumbnail styles quite a lot. And the second reason is, I just never really got around to it because I thought if I make a tutorial on it and then everyone ends up doing it, then it kind of like loses that authenticity. But I figured I'd make a tutorial on how I make my thumbnails and the general process behind making a basic PYROJOE thumbnail. So I'm going to show you the very basics of what I believe are important to be making a thumbnail. Like, it's quite flashy, it stands out quite a lot, and just overall we're just going to be starting from scratch and seeing what we can do. So without further ado, lads, we can just get straight into it. So you're going to want to start off in Photoshop. There is actually, hold on, if I open this, ignore the TF2 map there, if I open this, there's a site called Photopia, right? And it's essentially an online version of Photoshop. It's completely free to use, but it essentially has everything Photoshop uses. So if you don't have Photoshop, don't worry too much, as you can use the online variant. However, today we are going to be using Photoshop just for simplicity. Right, so we're going to start a new project. The size doesn't really matter. Generally 1920 1080 is the best. 1600 by 900 works as well, but just for like simplicity reasons, I'm going to be doing 1280 by 720. I don't know what the rest of this means, so I just leave it on like the default and we get a blank canvas. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do, and the core to a PYROJOE thumbnail, is you're going to want to download an image of a map, or you can just have one copy and pasted. For example, I have a picture of Harvest copied and pasted, right? And we're just going to put this on the canvas in the background. You hold Control and the minus key to zoom out the project a bit, and you can adjust it to like the size and you want, rotate it a bit and whatnot. Generally, I rotate it a tad, drag it up to an appropriate point for lighting, etc. And the next thing you're going to want to do, this is something I do in all of my thumbnails, is you're going to want to hit Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and just drag this to an appropriate amount. It doesn't need to be too blurred. I'd say about 6 is a solid amount of blur to have, right? And this is just so it takes the focus away from the TF2 background and it puts more focus on the foreground, which is going to be the text, right? And that's what you want everyone to see. So okay on that. Now we've got a blurred background. The next, you're going to want to use the text tool. Now the font for this isn't too important, but I like to use the TF2 build font. You can just search TF2 font, download it from DaFont or something. It's super easy. And generally, like, if you're making a TF2 video, you're gonna want this TF2 font, right? Whether that's for video editing or thumbnails. And also, it's a really easy to read and bold font as well. So for this thumbnail in particular, I'm just gonna type in PYROJOE. Actually, I'll do it in capitals just for simplicity purposes. I'm just gonna put PYROJOE, and we'll duplicate the layer, so we have another text layer, and we're going to put thumbnail, if I can spell it right. And it's obviously a bit bigger, so we're going to want to hit Control and T, hold Shift, and just drag that down, just so they're roughly on the same size. Obviously, the text is going to be a little bit smaller, but they take up roughly the same width of the area. Now, generally what I do in thumbnails is I'll have two contrasting colours, so green and pink, blue and yellow, red and blue. Generally just colours that kind of bounce off each other well. However, what I've started doing recently, I'll show some examples of it here and here, is I've started using white text, because everything just seems to bounce off it really well. So part of the text will be white and part of the text will be coloured. So for example, the PYROJOE in this thumbnail template is going to be white text, and then the thumbnail part is going to be coloured. So then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to right click on the PYROJOE text, the text you're going to leave white, hit where is it, blending options, hit stroke, and we're going to want to make this about between 5 and 6. It's really personal preference, it's just the outline on the text, right? I mean, you could go for like 10, which is super thick. You can just use the slider. I generally go for about 5 or 6, maybe 7, depends on how big the text is. The bigger the text, the bigger you're going to want the outline to be. Okay, so up next we're going to put some inner shadow on, and this is just for some depth on the text as well. You can kind of see already. I don't like the default settings a huge amount, but I do like what the effect does. So we're going to change the distance to about 2, generally. Between 2 and 5. But, yeah, that is generally what we're going to go for. You can mess around with, like, the bevel and emboss if you want to make it a bit more 3D. I do like the default bevel settings. It does kind of, like, make them pop out the screen a bit more. But, I mean, we'll just kind of stick with that. That is nice and readable. If we zoom way out, you can still see it says PYROJOE. And up next, we're going to do the thumbnail text. And this is, like, You can do this with the PYROJOE as well. This is just what I'd do, for example. I just want to show you like everything. So we're going to want to do the same stroke. We'll put it on about 6 again. And this time we're going to want to go to gradient overlay, right? And we're going to want to pick a bright, easily readable color. So pinks, yellows, blues, generally things like that. And we're going to want to drag the second point of the gradient way across to about there. And make it a darker shade of the colour we've used. So if we go pink, we'll go for like a darker pink or a purple. It is upside down at the moment as well. Generally, I will, if we press OK, I'll have it on the angle of -90, just so like the gradient goes downwards. And the next thing you're going to want to do, which is very important, right? This is if you don't really like how the outer glow looks. So I'm going to get rid of the outer glow. We're going to put the drop shadow on, and it's roughly, give or take, these values: 0, 18, and 54. And as you can see, it like, if we untick it and put it back on, it really does kind of like add a shadow around the text and just makes it stand out so much more, in my opinion. It completely darkens around it. And we're actually going to put the exact same settings on the PYROJOE text as well. So once again, drop shadow, 0, 18, and 54. And as you can see, I just think that looks so much better. However, if you don't like the white text and you want it to be a different colour, so for example the pink and the green are the two colours I said works together, what you can do is right click thumbnail, hit copy layer style and paste it onto the PYROJOE text, and then you have the same gradient on both texts. And you can switch up the colours super easy, just right click, gradient, and then I'm going to make it green, for example, because I think the green and the pink go well together. So we'll go for a light green first, and then a slightly darker one is what it fades into. And there is some very basic text. What I like to do next is some overlays over the map. So for example, click the map, and we're going to make a new layer, and click this gradient tool. And the colours aren't too important. Red to blue generally works super well. So we're just going to drag from one corner of the screen to the other, and we have this gradient in the background, but obviously now you can't see the map, so we're going to want to hit the opacity button and just drag this right down to about between about 5 and 15. I'd say is a good amount. Any more than that is just a bit too much. Now, one thing I like to do in my thumbnails is I'll put a blacked out silhouette of a class or a blacked out silhouette of a hat, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So you're going to want to open a PNG file of a hat. So for example, this is one from some PNGs I downloaded for some hats you won't see added. I'll take the Defiant Spartan, and as you can see now, we've just got a completely blank silhouette of the Defiant Spartan. We're going to want to hit the magic wand tool. It may be on quick selection, but put it on magic wand and click anywhere outside of the hat. And what this does is it highlights everything around the hat. We're going to then select inverse, hit the paintbrush tool, make sure it's on black, make sure the layer is rasterized, and just color this thing in. Then, something I like to do on these blacked out layers is blending options. Once again, stroke, we're going to make the stroke white this time and put it on 5 again, the magic value of 5. Control T so it's able to be transformed and move it about to where you think it would look good in the thumbnail. Of course, then we need a question mark over it, so just the TF2 font, nothing added to the question mark whatsoever. Maybe make it a tiny bit thinner. Control T, transform it as much as you like. So it looks good like that. I generally have the question mark quite small so you can see what the kind of hat is. And yeah, what else do I do in my thumbnails? Now, one thing that is incredibly underrated in thumbnails, I feel, is overlays on top of the map once again. So, we have the gradient overlay already, but what I'm going to add on now is a particle overlay. You can literally just go onto Google and search like dust particles or anything like that, and you're just going to want to find an image that you think looks cool and hit Control V, and there you go. And as you can see, it's these big particles with a light, and I want the light and the bright area to be in the bottom right of the screen. So we're going to rotate it around, and it's in the bottom left. And if that ever happens to you, just simply hit edit, transform, and flip horizontal. It's in the angle you want it to be, right? So we have our particles, but you can see that it takes up like the majority of the thumbnail and you can't even see the map. So we're going to want to drag the opacity down just like we did with the gradient. And as you can see, instantly it adds some depth, it adds some background to the map, and we get that bright area in the bottom right as we planned as well. And there's not really a set amount of particles, it's just how visible you want them to be. Generally around 50% works pretty well for me. And that's really all there is to it. That is the core of a very basic PYROJOE thumbnail. One thing I do obviously have added as well is I'll always have like 2 images in a thumbnail as well. So it may be like a Defiant Spartan and then a soldier. So we'll just get an image, for example, Right, this medic, I used this medic the other day in like a silhouette form. We're going to want to make sure the layer is below the text as well, otherwise, I mean, he'll be up there, and it's not, sometimes it looks better over the text, but it depends on how you're going to be using it. For this example, I think it's going to look better under the text. We'll just drag it under, for example, hit stroke once again. Oh wait, no, yeah, sometimes that will happen when you hit stroke, and that just means there's extra stuff in the image, so we're going to want to untick stroke, magic wand it again, or actually no, we're going to want a quick selection and just highlight the medic, everything we want kind of in the thumbnail or in the image to stay. We're just going to want to highlight everything just to get rid of that background, because for whatever reason it saves with particles. It seems that is just about enough. We're going to want to Control Shift I or select inverse, whatever way you prefer. Delete, make sure it's rasterized. Delete, select, deselect, drag it back under the thumbnail, and we're going to put that stroke on again. Go like that, much better this time. We'll put some white stroke on, put it on 5, put some outer glow on, the colour's not too important, red. Okay, so for whatever reason, my Photoshop crashed and didn't save the project, so I just recreated this super quickly. I used some extra overlays as well and just put them in a folder called layers and put all the text in a folder called text. As you can see, just very basic. We're back pretty much to where we started. I actually didn't completely erase the medic background, but this would be pretty much finished, right? And there's one last thing I like to do is just merge all the layers. So highlight all the layers, hold shift and click all the layers. So just right click, merge layers, so now everything is on the same layer. Then just simply hit image, adjustments, saturation, and just drag the saturation up. Generally to between 20 and 30, it just kind of brightens everything up. And that is a super basic PYROJOE thumbnail. I'm going to go back to myself when I did the outro. And yeah. But guys, that is just about it for this video. If you did enjoy, then please do remember to leave a like and let me know your thoughts down below. If you'd like to see more videos like this and general gaming content, then do be sure to subscribe. Thanks again so much for watching, guys, and peace.